So we're here at the ESCoE Conference, and we've just had our first keynote speech by André Loranger, who joins me here. André is the Chief Statistician of Canada. Fascinating presentation you just gave, really surveying the sort of challenges, but also the opportunities that NSIs across the world are facing at the moment. You were using a framework within your speech of gather, guard, grow, give. And we sort of see grow in that, but inevitably, and you touched upon this when you were giving the speech, there's trade-offs that need to be made and prioritization decisions that need to be taken when you're in an NSI. And it would be really interesting if we can dig into that a bit more. How is Statistics Canada making some of those difficult choices?
Thanks, Liz. In my keynote, I also said bigger, better, faster. And that's where that trade-off comes from. So as we try to address the demand for data, we're also faced with sort of budgetary pressures and various constraints. And so inevitably, we have to think about priorities. In our organization, over the last year and a half, we've been spending considerable amount of time thinking about how we actually arrive at a mechanism for priority setting. It was in the context of budget reductions, but I think as well, it's very useful to think about priority setting all the time in the context of evolving society and sort of making the process evergreen. So what we did really was come up with a framework that looks at how statistics are used. What are the government priorities? How the data is actually being used? Does the data impact the key economic aggregates like the GDP and so on? And we were able to put together a short list of sort of key markers where we were able to evaluate sort of all the data that we have, all the things that we do in that lens. And then applying a little bit more pressure to it and saying, okay, well, if we were in a scenario where we had to reduce our budget by 30% or so on, where would we land? And that framework was really, really helpful. In the end, I think it's not just sort of putting X's in boxes. We need to have fundamental discussions about what's important, but it certainly allowed us to position ourselves better to have that discussion. And moving forward, I just think that we constantly need to be reevaluating our priorities, working it into our planning assumptions and our scenarios for future years. Always thinking about in the context of a finite budget, what are the key things that we need to do, and what are the things that we need to stop doing to enable us to do some of those more important things, including new statistics on emerging topics.
And in your talk, you mentioned sort of trade-offs often come down to trade-offs between different users, and there's large numbers of different users of official statistics, and they have different wants and needs. How are you managing those trade-offs between the users, and I guess engaging them in the process of making them itself?
But I think that's the challenge itself. As I said in the keynote address, every data point that we produce is used by a stakeholder. So when we have to make tough decisions about the data that we produce, it's really making tough decisions about the needs of those various stakeholders. So we take that really seriously. Through the framework that I've just talked about, but also sort of just consultations across society with the various stakeholder groups and the people that fund certain statistics, we're able to arrive at a way forward. And presumably in any trade-off scenario, some people are happy and some people aren't. If we had infinite budgets and infinite capacity, we could sort of we could produce all the statistics that everybody needs. Unfortunately, that's not the case, so we have to make choices.
No, absolutely. And taking a step back and looking at, I guess, the gather frame and survey collection, which is obviously fundamental to the statistics process. You began talking about survey data and the challenge that NSIs around the world have faced, really, of falling response rates for household surveys. Certainly acutely felt here in the UK, but I know elsewhere as well. And it was really interesting to hear about the different experimentation you were doing with your own labour force survey to try and make sure that response, and not just the response, but the fact that it needs to be representative and non-biased, the sort of different experiments that you're using to try and maintain that response despite these sort of headwinds of falling response levels. Can you tell us a bit more about those experiments? And I guess it'd be really interesting to know, have any of them scaled well in practice, gone beyond that sort of pilot stage to actually making a meaningful difference?
Well, in our Beyond 80 project, which is to bring the response rates of our labor force survey beyond 80%. As I mentioned in the keynote, they were 95% in the mid-90s, slightly lower now, certainly after the pandemic. So we are making a concerted effort through this experimentation to raise the response rates up. There's a lot of things that have scaled quite well. We're trying to do more or less an experiment a month. So some new idea, some new concept, we try it out. So if it works, it's implemented. It's that simple. And then there's a few things that I can talk about that have worked really well. In the keynote address, I talked about our the initialization process, or what we call our month zero initiative. Typically, people that were inducted into the labor force survey would be contacted during the collection period of their first month, and to sort of facilitate collection, teach the respondents how to respond to the questionnaire, inform them that this is happening, and then so on. We've contacted now the month before the collection period to let them know that this is coming and so on. And that's been quite effective. We've also experimented with text messages. And normally we send reminders at a certain period in time. This is what we've done historically. What we're doing now is we've experimented with when we send the text messages. So we're sending the text messages around the same time that they responded the last month. And that seems to be quite useful. But beyond that, sending another text message doesn't work. So we've stopped doing it. So there's a lot of those things. It's learning by doing a little bit, but if it works, we put it in and so on.
Are you bringing in different skill sets to help sort of shape those experiments?
Any different skill sets? Well, I think we're asking our methodology to really lead here, our methodology experts, particularly in the phases of the survey process where we're really sort of looking at adaptive ways to modify our we look at response rates, and sort of we use our methodologists to really target where perhaps in certain areas the sample is weaker and where we need to beef up responses and so on. Interestingly, we're also doing a lot of public opinion research on what people think about the labor force survey, what they know about the labor force survey, how it's used, and so on. And that's done in partnership with another department that has capacity in terms of public opinion research, because we don't do that kind of work. So it's a different skill set that we're sort of, we recognize that we can't be everything to everybody. We can't know everything. So we've partnered with another organization in the public service that does this kind of work. And it's been really, really helpful.
Cool. What insights have you found there?
Well, we're able to sort of pinpoint, who knows about the labor force, what are their demographics, and then we're able to target messages to the various personas or groups based on the feedback that we've seen.
One of the, I guess, reactions to the challenges with survey data and getting the best possible quality data from it has been drawing in a wider range of data sources than we may have used in the past. And you discussed in your talk really the importance of some of the key administrative data sources and how they were used in some cases as direct replacements to surveys, sometimes complements, and increasingly in official statistics that they can be found. I guess it'd be interesting to hear about some of the significant challenges to that approach, and particularly be interested to sort of think about using administrative data can bring new forms of uncertainty. And I would be interested the approach that you're taking to engage in people, particularly an external audience, in that uncertainty, so they can make the best use of the statistics we produce and understand both, their strengths and also where there's shortcomings that they need to be aware of.
Well, that's a really good question. In traditional statistics, you're trying to measure a certain result for a given population through a sample, and through statistical methods you can arrive at quality measures around those estimates, confidence intervals, and those kind of things. With administrative data, it's collected for a different purpose. You don't know how it was collected, so you can't really apply that. Now, in terms of traditional statistics, there are international frameworks and so on that generally national statistics organizations know how to do that. The system is evolving now to sort of try to wrap administrative data in a similar framework. Certainly at Statistics Canada, we have a quality assurance framework that we apply, but it's mainly centered around survey statistics. But we are trying to sort of bring in concepts from administrative data into it. One of the things I think that in the absence of a framework like that, we have to rely a lot on what we know about how the data was collected, what kind of edits were made to the data, how is sort of what kind of methods are the providers using in their own systems to measure. So there's really a collaboration with the data providers on sort of, okay, well, what are the processes that they do to clean the data so that we can better understand it and better explain it. Fortunately, at this point, I think we still struggle with sort of providing a confidence interval on some of those things. But over time, and sort of after using that data quite a bit, you develop some kind of expertise, and you intuitively know sort of the weaknesses or the strengths of that data, and you can sort of explain them.
And those relationships with the data providers become quite critical in those circumstances.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I guess that sort of same concept of the importance of relationships also comes about when we're thinking about how we're collecting data from businesses. And in your talk, you talked about taking a large case unit type approach, which we also do in the UK and finding incredibly helpful. I was thinking of large businesses who have obligations to fill in many of our surveys, but thinking of them more as long-term data partners, and thinking about how we can use some of those relationships to get better at some of the measurement challenges that we now have in a complex multinational economy. It'd be useful to hear how that experience has played out in Canada. And I guess also, given that multinational dimension, is there more that we could be doing across NSIs to really get the most coherent data when we've got these large multinational, quite complex ownership structures?
Yeah, I think absolutely. The first thing I think is it starts domestically with understanding the domestic structure of those large firms. So we spend a lot of time on that. Given the large firm in manufacturing might cross sort of various industries as we define them, parts of it in manufacturing, parts of it in wholesale, and that determines what vehicles we use to collect information from them and so on. And we actually have to make decisions about this part of the organization is over here and this part is over here. So that's really important. But then when you think about sort of those companies having activities abroad, then you have to think about sort of, okay, the flows within those entities and sort of where is profit recorded, where is a certain activity recorded in research and development, for example. The research and development might be done elsewhere. So understanding the relationship creates understanding the firm and how it's organized really helps you understand the flows that you're able to measure. But I think it also opens the door to perhaps more collaboration across countries from the NSOs in terms of understanding those structures. I think there's a lot of barriers to doing that. Data sharing is always the first one. But I think there are ways that people can sit down and say, well, this is how this operation works, and just having the dialogue about sort of the various flows is really, really useful. If we can get to a point where we can actually exchange data, that's really great. But I think we have a lot of work to do there. The other thing too is to maybe engage the corporations a lot, maybe differently. So we're approaching it from an international perspective first and saying, I like to think about visions and scenarios without constraints. And to me, and I think I mentioned that in the keynote, or in the question and answer period, if we could sort of figure out these are the operations of a particular entity, and these are the flows across, and we can share them, that should be the ideal. Given that we can't do that because there's certain barriers to it, what is the next best step? And I think if we approach it from that perspective, there's probably a lot of things that we can do to get a better handle on the flows and the relationships that occur. And then in the absence of all that, I think there are other things that we can do that help us understand sort of the globalization and sort of the impact of multinationals on various economies. We can look at products like extended supply use table and so on, which don't give you the microdata information, but certainly give you a perception or a perspective at the aggregate of how these different flows and relationships shape domestic and international economies.
Yeah, and make step-by-step progress to answer the ultimate question.
And also sort of in the space of international trade, often, during trade negotiations, there's bilateral discussions between countries and alignment and so on. And I think we need to do more of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Changing tack now slightly. A really important theme within your keynote speech, and I think a really important one for us within National Statistical Institutes more broadly, is that of trust. You talked a lot about the investment that Statistics Canada had made on this in recent years, and it would be really interesting to hear from your experiences of going on that journey and what really, now sort of reflecting back, what really makes a difference in the space of I guess being a trustworthy organization, and then in turn having your statistics trusted. Are there things that you would particularly point to now as being sort of almost game changers in that space?
Well, I guess the first thing I would say is that as statisticians, we're often guilty of speaking our own language. And we have to recognize that when we communicate about any issue, we need to communicate in the language that people understand. And I think that'll foster trust. If we start sort of having detailed conversation about sort of very complicated SNA concepts that nobody really knows what they are except the SNA practitioners, then people don't understand and they lose trust right away. Second thing is that I think generally what I see is that there's a general lack of understanding about the importance of statistics in terms of operating government and a modern democracy. And that I think it starts there. So we, I think, have a big role to play in terms of articulating how the data are used and why specifically it matters to you or me or the man on the street. And so I think we have to sort of develop very precise language for the different stakeholders that we have to make sure that our message gets through. Now, In terms of building trust, we've basically in Statistics Canada said that, well, everything that we do, we're going to make public, whether it's our collection efforts or our thoughts on, okay, this is a collection activity that's going to start, how the data is used, and so on. So people can actually go onto the website and sort of find that. You could say, well, people don't go on the website. That's fair, but at least it's there if they want to. I think we maybe need to figure out better ways to tell our story, but certainly I think the Trust Center and our website is sort of the key point of that. Now, beyond that, I think to me, on any type of project and on any type of issue that you're trying to build trust, you have to take a very systematic approach to it. So when the ideas come out, you have to start talking about them and socializing them. You have to write about them. You have to sort of, circulate those ideas and listen to the feedback that you get and sort of weave it into the next evolution of whatever you're working on. You have to make sure to consult all the stakeholders and build those relationships. Very important is you have to demonstrate why this is useful. And why is it important? And if it's a collection activity, for example, why should an individual give you their information? What is it? What use does it have for them? So I think we need to do that. And again, when you put all these things together, I think it provides a more comprehensive way of moving forward in trust. In the keynote, I said moving at the speed of trust and social acceptability, and I think that's really, really important. And the more you socialize these ideas, and the more support you get for those ideas, the better likelihood it is that you'll have success with those ideas.
Do you think the same principles apply for individuals and households and businesses? Or?
I think so.
Yeah.
Maybe you approach them a little bit differently, but certainly yes.
In your presentation, you moved on to talking about dissemination, the give, I guess, part of the framework, and discussed the kind of paradox, I guess, of rising automated access at the same time of falling human engagement, and the need for our statistics now to be AI ready being a really important theme for NSIs to grasp right now. Can you tell us a little more about your thinking there?
Well, in simple terms, I think when I think about AI readiness, I think about making sure that the AIs of the world can find the official statistics. So when somebody queries ChatGPT and says, what's the GDP in the UK, that they actually get the value that comes from the statistical office. I think that's really important. And I'm not sure that's the case right now. So part of AI readiness is making sure that we engage with the hyperscalers and the AI developers to make sure that we figure out how we can better understand those mechanisms. Part of it, I think, is standardization, sort of using and being very transparent again about how the data is organized, where is it, what is it, and so on. And there's a lot of frameworks that do that. In the world of statistics, we use SDMX. It's the metadata is really important, and it's codified a certain way, and it allows the AIs to look for that. So I think that's part of the answer. The other part is that I think it forces a reflection as well in terms of like, what kind of data do we want to disseminate? The big question I think is often like, are we speaking to individuals? Are we speaking to machines? Or are we speaking to individuals through machines? And I think it's probably all of those things. And we need to make sure that we think about those things so that we can build them into our systems so that official statistics still have prominence in sort of the ecosystem of data.
And how do you think we maintain being an influential voice in that ecosystem? I mean, part of your answer is a sort of technical answer about how the statistics can be found by by AI. But I guess what role remains for us to tell the story of the statistics?
Well, for me, part of that answer comes back to our role in educating users and making them more data literate. So as statistical organizations, we have hundreds of years of expertise in sort of transforming data into useful products, useful insights, official statistics. There's a lot of rigor, there's a lot of transparency, there's methods and so on. And so I think we have a role to play in terms of educating users about how you distinguish between a good piece of data and a bad piece of data. For example, if you go to any statistical organization and you tell them, well, how did you calculate this? There's a good likelihood that the statistical organization has very good documented methodology. It's probably published on, this is how we arrive at that number. This is how that number is reproducible because we use standardized methods, they vetted and so on. Whereas if you just pull a number off the internet, if you can't find that information about the data source and the provenance and so on, I think it's legitimate to ask questions about that data set and whether it's a good data point or not. And I think generally people now are looking just for quick answers. They get on their phone, Google number, there's the number. Well, so coming back to your question, I think a large role that statistical organizations have to play is the data literacy piece across the countries.
No, absolutely, and getting ever more important.
Yeah.
Yeah. But finally, we're here at the ESCoE Conference, which is a great opportunity to bridge the world that we're in National Statistical Institutes with the academic world, and have those collaborative cross-sector conversations. From your experiences, when's that worked really well, that sort of academic engagement with the NSIs? Are there sort of any examples that you would draw on of those sort of relationships being not just effective, but really impactful?
Yeah. Well, I would think that the first thing I'd like to say is that generally, it is a cycle. I think, academic researchers and other users have questions. They ask those questions. They come to the NSOs and say, hey, is there data on this? Is there data on that? Because we have a particular phenomena that we're studying, or we have an issue that we're trying to address. And that prompts national statistics organizations to sort of think about, we need to be developing data on these issues because they are sort of being discussed in society, and we do need to better understand these issues. So that leads to the development of statistical programs, which leads to putting data in the hands of researchers who use that data, who then ask more questions on that particular topic or a related one, and so on. So it is a bit of a cycle. I see it as an ecosystem where statistical organizations are part of it, but we're only one part of that ecosystem. And the evolution of statistics depend on the thoughts that the researchers have at the moment, and where what are the issues of the day for government and so on. It's just a big, large ecosystem where we all interact together. Now, are there specific examples? I'm sure there are tons. I think if you think about the origins of the system of national accounts, those were kind of academics getting together saying, how do we measure sort of the economic activity in countries? And now sort of it's after 70, 80 years, it's grown into sort of a huge sequence of accounts. And with the latest SNA manual, it's 1,000 pages long. So like the science evolves and it develops, but those are sort of examples of like the impact that researchers have.
Absolutely, fundamental ones.
Yeah.
And conferences like this are a great way of cross-fertilization between different groups of people.
I think it was an interesting piece to do at the beginning of a conference like this, because now you've got the researchers who probably don't hear those messages very often in terms of sort of the constraints and the pressures that we have and how we're doing things. But I think having those dialogues is really useful.
Yeah, and I think your keynote has set us up for a good few days of discussion from here on in.
Well, I sure hope so.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.